Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this month's Stepping Up webinar on 3 steps to identifying and collecting data on people with mental illnesses in your jail. My name is Nastasia Walsh. I am a program manager at the National Association of Counties. I'm going to be moderating today's webinar. Just before we begin, I'm going to go over some technical details to make sure everybody can view the webinar correctly. So, as you can see on the screen, so the webinar is being recorded. It's going to be posted on the Stepping Up website under the toolkit, so you can go check that out later. We'll also include the slides on there. As far as some logistics on the software, to the right of your screen, you're going to see that there's a control panel, and in the panel there's a questions box. You can use this box at any time to type in your questions or send us a message if you're having any technical difficulties. If you are having technical issues like you can't hear or you can't see the slides, we'll respond to you within that Q&A box privately, so keep an eye on that. Also, during the question and answer period, I will read the question on your behalf. Feel free to start submitting questions as early as you want. If it's in the middle of the presentation, we'll do Q&A at the very end of the whole presentation, but you could submit those questions at any time. If you want to have a better view of the presentation, you can click the small orange arrow in the top left corner. That'll minimize that dashboard for you. So this webinar is part of Stepping Up, which is a national initiative to reduce the number of people with mental illnesses in jails. Stepping Up launched in May of 2015, so 4 years ago, through a partnership between the National Association of Counties, the Council of State Governments Justice Center, and the American Psychiatric Association Foundation. And the initiative receives generous support from the U.S. Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Assistance, as well as other private and corporate sponsors. So we thank our sponsors for engaging with us. So as many of you know, this is not your first webinar. As part of the launch of Stepping Up 4 years ago, the partners asked counties to join the initiative by passing a resolution or proclamation stating that they wanted to be part of the initiative. They were committing to creating a sustainable and data-driven plan to impact the number of people with mental illnesses in their jails. So as of yesterday afternoon, we have 489 counties that have submitted resolutions to join Stepping Up. So thank you. We're almost at 500. We would love to reach 500 during this month of May, which is the Stepping Up Month of Action that we'll talk, Lindsey's going to talk about, and also Mental Health Awareness Month. So of the 489 counties, these counties span 43 different states and encompass more than 140 million county residents. So we're really seeing a high impact there across the country. So you can see a full list of counties that have joined the initiative on the Stepping Up website. Just search under the counties, and you can click on Stepping Up counties, and it'll list them all by state, so you can check and see if your county is one of them. Also on that website, you can download a copy of the template resolution. Just download that, modify it to your county's needs, make sure it's taken to your county board of commissioners or supervisors, and then once they pass it, just email it over to the initiative, and we'll make sure that you all are hooked up on the website and listed there, and make sure you're getting all the resources through Stepping Up. So we are still collecting resolutions, and like I said, we'd really like to get to 500 in May, so let us know if you need any help getting on with that. So we know that many of you have been working on this issue for some time and made a ton of progress. We're going to hear from some of our counties today. But we also want to encourage you to do a little more this year to move your own initiative forward. So we're pushing counties to, quote unquote, step up their efforts in 2019. To get started with this, we suggest that counties fill out the Stepping Up County Self-Assessment to identify an area or multiple areas where your county needs some improvement. So you can get that on the Stepping Up website under Toolkit. There's a drop-down menu for the self-assessment. You know, as you're going through that, maybe you're close to implementing a mental health screening and assessment process, or you want to become a Stepping Up Innovator County in 2019. Maybe you need to get some folks back in the room and reconvene. Maybe you need to get started and pass a resolution and get working on this. So use the self-assessment results to pick one or a couple of priorities to fully implement in the next couple of months. Use all of the Stepping Up resources that you heard about in the February webinar, and the February webinar recording is up on the website if you want to go look at that under the toolkit. That's where we keep all of the webinars. So use those resources. And then in July, we'll be asking counties to report out on what you've been able to accomplish in 2019 and to highlight some of your great work. So we hope you'll join us in this Step Up Your Efforts, and look forward to supporting you as you go along. And let us know if you have any questions about this effort. So now I'm going to turn it over to Lindsey Fox, and Lindsey is the Development Officer of Corporate and Foundation Relations at the American Psychiatric Association Foundation, which is a national Stepping Up partner. And Lindsey's been working on this Stepping Up issue since the beginning. She's going to talk about some of the events and goals we have planned for the Stepping Up Month of Action. So Lindsey, I will turn it over to you.
Sure, great, thanks Nastasia. Good afternoon everyone. As Nastasia stated, my name is Lindsey Fox and I'm Development Officer for the APAS. I'm stepping in today for Chris Seeley, who is the Program Director of School and Justice Initiatives for the Foundation. The Month of Action plan is really aimed at mobilizing counties to bring more attention to the hard work that you're doing, and most importantly, bringing awareness to those individuals living with SMI cycling through the criminal justice system. We like to think of stepping up as a movement, not a moment, and this phrase was coined at the beginning of the initiative in 2015, which some of you will remember and some of you won't. So next slide, please. Okay. So here's kind of the plan for the Month of Action. The purpose was to encourage and empower participating counties to demonstrate their impact and highlight their efforts towards reducing the number of persons with mental illnesses in jails. All the hard work that you've been doing, the stories that you want to share, the progress that you have made within the bones of the initiative. We do have 4 main goals for this: highlighting the progress your county has made with its Stepping Up efforts, showcase your county's Stepping Up team, share experiences of people impacted by your county's Stepping Up efforts, and encouraging your peers in peer counties to step up for mental health, those counties that are nearby, people that you have contact with, just encouraging them to get involved in the initiative as a whole. So you can share these milestones with us by contacting info@steppingup.org and or sharing with us on social media. You can use our hashtag, which is StepUp for Mental Health, which would pull in all the major social media channels. So we look forward to seeing some of those stories shared throughout the month. So next slide, please. So if we go into week 1 of the initiative, it's going to be focused on highlighting the progress your county has made with its Stepping Up efforts. These efforts would be passing a proclamation about participating in the Month of Action, hosting an event to highlight progress in your community, sharing a press release highlighting your county's progress, creating an infographic, slideshow, video, anything about your efforts, things that we could share as well. Submitting op-eds or articles to local outlets highlighting your impact. As I said again, please send these to us at info@steppingup.org, as well as using our hashtag StepUp for Mental Health. We'd really love to see them and all the progress and hard work that's being done in the county. Also, if you're looking for additional resources or how to move forward in your Stepping Up progress, as Nastasia mentioned, we do have cool toolkits on the website and other information. www.stepuptogether.org. That can help you. So next slide. Okay, so week 2, the focus of this week will be to showcase your county's Stepping Up team. So post a photo of your county's team, create a video with interviews of Stepping Up team members, testimonials to the work that they're doing in the field, create and promote your county's Stepping Up website. I've seen some of these myself, and they're very impressive. Share stories on why your team members have stepped up. And then, as I've continued to say, don't forget to use the hashtag so that we can share and increase that footprint for you. Next slide, please. Okay, so for week 3, this is share experiences of people impacted by your county Stepping Up efforts, people with lived experience, creating a video with them, interviewing people who are impacted by your work, who live every day with a serious mental illness, sharing photos and stories of people impacted by your work, sharing or creating a blog post on your county's website by a person impacted, working with your local NAMI chapter to engage individuals. For any psychiatrists attending this webinar or attending the APA annual meeting, we do have a session for Stepping Up at our meeting. The session is titled Advancing Psychiatrist Influence Within the Criminal Justice System. It's May 19th, which is a Sunday, from 8 to 11 a.m. in Moscone Center, room 151. We have some speakers that have been involved with the initiative since the beginning. Dr. Alpha Stewart, Dr. Michael Champion, Judge Steve Leifman, many others that have been just, spearheading this from the beginning, from the treatment side of things. So, reach out to Chris or myself, and we're happy to connect you with that. Next slide, please. And lastly, week 4, so the last week of the month of action, would be to encourage your peers in peer counties to step up for mental health. Send a letter to a non-stepping up county encouraging them to join. Publish articles in your state news about the need for change. Share video testimonials and tag non-stepping up counties. Participate in the Step Up Twitter chat May 30th from 12 to 1 p.m. And then, as I've said all along, do not forget to use the hashtag Step Up for Mental Health so that we can share your progress and really, see what everybody's doing. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lindsey. Obviously, lots of opportunities here for counties to get a little bit creative with what you want to do, and feel free to go beyond some of these suggestions that we had, because we know folks had a lot of cool ideas last year when they did the day of action. And I blasted out, I think in the questions box, the hashtag so folks can see it, but we'll have it throughout the slides as well. So we hope everybody's going to do that. So why don't we do a really quick poll and see who is planning on joining the month of action. So the poll should be in progress now. You can see it up on the screen. So we're just asking, are you planning on participating in the Stepping Up month of action? Let's give everybody another couple of seconds to fill that out. Okay, why don't we show the results? Excellent. So folks should be able to see up on the screen. So about a quarter of you said yes, you're going to be participating in the Stepping Up month of action. Some of you said no, and most of you said unsure. Maybe this is the first time that you're hearing about it. Make sure that you're on the email list. So on stepuptogether.org, you click on the red button that says Take Action. You'll make sure that you're on the Stepping Up email list. We just sent out an email about this, I think, yesterday, as well as a few weeks ago. If you're interested in getting involved in the Stepping Up month of action, just go to the Stepping Up website, so stepuptogether.org, and on that home page, you'll see a green bar that talks about Stepping Up month of action. Click on that button, and you'll see sort of a summary of all of the things that Lindsey just talked about, some of the activities, all of the tools and links that are available, templates, social media posts, all sorts of stuff. So everything you need to get involved, for your county to get involved in participating in the Stepping Up month of action is up on that website. So we hope that folks will be part of that. We don't have a list because counties don't have to sign up in order to be participating in the month of action, but we do ask that you email us and let us know either what you're doing or what you did. Send us any pictures or any press releases or anything that you guys do, and then of course use the hashtag on social media. So thank you everybody for participating in the month of action. We hope that that percentage of folks who say yes is going to be increasing there. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about the month of action. All right, I'm going to move right along. So next we have Risa Hanneberg, who is a Deputy Division Director for County Initiatives at the Council of State Governments Justice Center, another one of our national Stepping Up partners. And Risa is going to talk about how your county can organize itself around the Stepping Up 3-step approach and key strategies for identifying and collecting data on people with mental illnesses. So sort of a primer to talk about some of these strategies that we're going to talk about throughout today's webinar. So Risa, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you, Nastasia. Okay, next slide. Hi everyone, and happy May. I'm super excited about May. I want to thank everyone who has already started sending in their activities for May, and just also be expecting, I think, a lot of information flowing more than normal during the month of May. So some of you are saying, well, I think we've already gone through this 3-step criteria process for positioning your county to be able to track your data and to be able to, be able to show if you're making progress in your goals and your efforts there at the county. So just a couple refresher slides. I'm sure most of this is familiar to all of you, if not most of you anyway, but the Stepping Up initiative really calls for a paradigm shift, and we really want to move from just doing isolated pilot kinds of projects to a more system-wide decision-making process where you can see both that the stakeholders from across both criminal justice and behavioral health and other key stakeholders in the community are at the table and planning. And again, very much a data-driven process, being able to identify your numbers, what your capacities are, what your needs are. That's that quantification of the problem, and making sure that your implementation is scaled to your needs. We feel like this is the effort that's necessary to be able to see true moving of the needle. Next slide. And again, just another reminder, the Stepping Up initiative is based on this foundational document, reducing the number of people with mental illnesses in jail, 6 questions county leaders need to ask. And I'm hoping for many of you, you have these 6 questions somewhat memorized. Is our leadership committed? Do we conduct timely screening and assessments? Do we have baseline data? Have we conducted a comprehensive process analysis and inventory of services? Have we prioritized policy, practice, and funding improvements? And do we track progress? And I'm really not going to break those down today because our focus today is going more into the 3-step process, but certainly we have the backup webinars and information if you have questions about any of those 6 questions. Next slide. And then from the 6 questions, we have the 4 key measures. And so advising and providing guidance to all of you as you work through your data planning and, what key data items and targets should we be addressing. We recommend that it be around these 4 key measures. The first one is around measuring and be able to identify reducing the number of people who have mental illness booked into your jail. Second one, for those who do come into your jail, that you shorten their length of stay. That average length of stay, ALOS, as it's normally referred to, we see in many, if not most jails, that those who have an SMI tend to stay in jails up to 2 or more or longer, 2 times longer than the general population without an SMI. At the time of discharge, are you making sure and tracking that you are increasing your connection to treatment and support services in your community for those with SMI? We know how crucial it is for literally those first days, hours, to have that connection in place, that warm handoff to make sure that the individual is in a much better position to be successful upon release in the community. And fourth and the final measure is tracking to see if you're reducing the recidivism rates for those individuals, those people who are coming into your jail with an SMI. Next slide. So what we have found, and as Nastasia said, we're kicking off our 4th year here in May, and actually it was a year ago in May that we targeted that these were 3 steps that every jurisdiction would hopefully prioritize. If you're in your planning team and, where do we begin, what do we do? In order to be able to really move forward and to know that you've moved forward, you've got to know where you're starting from. If you don't know your rate of individuals, the number of individuals in your jail with a serious mental illness, it's going to be very hard to measure if you are reducing that number. Very hard to compare that population against the general population for their length of stay. It's going to be very hard to be able to track those connections to care, and very hard to track if there's been a repeat booking into the jail. So what we really, I think, want to emphasize today is that these 3 steps, although they seem rather prescribed, are going to look very different in jurisdictions all across the country. And in fact, we're going to have 2 featured presenters today that are going to go through their steps and will show you that it's different amongst those 2 jurisdictions. But the first one, establish a shared definition of SMI for your stepping up efforts that's used throughout both your criminal justice and your behavioral health systems. So what we're finding is that many sites across the country are first turning to those state definitions that are provided. All states are, in fact, are required to have a state definition and able to leverage many of the federal funds that come through defining serious mental illness and who would then qualify for that funding stream. Not saying that this has to be your definition, not saying that you maybe want to embellish it or make it more user-friendly, more understandable between all your stakeholders, but what is important is that you agree upon this definition and that you are using that as your guidepost in terms of knowing that as you start out and you set your baselines, and then a year from now or however often you track progress, that that is not the juncture where you're saying, oh, well, what were we counting? You know, to make sure that all along you've got that apples to apples approach going on. The second step is to use a validated mental health screening tool on every person booked into jail and refer people who screen positive for symptoms of SMI to a follow-up clinical assessment by a licensed mental health professional. So I'm just going to start off by saying I know that this is a big lift. And as we work with jails across the country, first of all, let's just break this down and state that, you know, a mental health screening tool that is validated, we tend to recommend it as we get asked, and tools that are available that they are not going to cost you, that they're out in the open market, if you will. However, we know and we'll see from our representatives today from Lubbock, Texas, that their state prescribes a certain screening tool to be used. So once again, just trying to demonstrate that it's not one size, everybody has to use the same, and to show that there are certainly options and a decision process for your planning team as to which tool to use. The next part of this second step also, I think, becomes difficult because we know that jails are very, very much a churning population. In fact, if there's a bond schedule or some agreements in place around certain kinds of underlying charges, what have you, that booking process can move very, very quickly. It's difficult to get the mental health screening done along with all the other steps that are required for the booking process, let alone to think those who would screen positive would be able to receive that follow-up clinical assessment. Many times what we see is that for those who do not bond out and do remain, that jails can get that accomplished, you know, within like a 72-hour time frame. We know that that can even be difficult. So one of the things I think we wanted to stress today is that in realizing that that is very much the reality of jails, that if it's not done in the jail, that there is a process to continue to follow that individual into the community and make sure that that follow-up assessment is completed. Now that is also many times easier said than done. Maybe the person released is not under any sort of court supervision or requirements at that point that would, you know, require them to follow up and complete that clinical assessment. But we do recommend that there be a genuine effort made, that there be, you know, certainly more than handing them a card, call this number, but there be a process in place where there would be phone follow-up, some level of effort to recontact that person and get that clinical assessment completed. Now, if that doesn't happen during that pretrial phase, and the individual, the person, does end up being convicted and remains in the system under some level of supervision, certainly that process could be followed up at that juncture, and would recommend that if it hasn't happened by that time. So I think that's just a really long way of saying we recommend that this screening occur at booking in the jail. We get that much completed at that booking stage as much as possible. If the individual remains in the jail, that the follow-up clinical assessment is completed. But those who are discharged, that there be a more formalized process, if you will, that would be an effort to ensure that the clinical assessment is completed. And then the third item here is that the information that is reported and the results of the screening, that this is recorded electronically, and that is in order that you in your planning process, that you can easily get to your data, that you will be able to then flag the population in the jail that are needing the services, and upon discharge, that to make sure, as we're looking at that third key measure as far as ensuring and increasing connections to care, that we know which individuals those are and that that connection to care is completed. So I'm going to stop there and maybe switch to the next slide, Nastasia. So as we have launched this three-step criteria, which again was a year ago, during the past year, we have worked to identify sites across the country that are demonstrated that they have these three steps implemented. And so as we kicked this off a year ago, we had 7 sites. During the course of the year, we have added 4 more. In fact, our 2 newest additions are being featured today, Berks County, Pennsylvania, and Lubbock County, Texas. We want to see more stars on this map, and I think we probably have more of you out there, and that's why we really wanted to walk through this criteria, understand what it would mean, what it might look like for you in your jurisdiction, and also understand that there's flexibility in how you might be able to implement it. So again, we'd love to have your star on the map. When you're on the Stepping Up website, you can find more information there about being an innovator site and who they are. And if you feel like you are close to the status or would need some additional assistance, direction, or whatever, please send us an email to the info line, and we will get with you directly. So thank you. I'll toss it back to Nastasia. Oh, one more slide. Okay, so then also what we want to make sure is at the end of your work, and if you're in this position, you have your 3-step criteria in place. It will certainly guide your planning process, and as you go and you circle back always to those 4 key measures to make sure you're being directed in your planning and your implementation so that your efforts will be measurable. Just to give you some ideas, like what do you mean? What are some of the things that you might do to reduce the number of individuals booked into jail with a serious mental illness? So, just some ideas there that tend to be at that point of law enforcement contact, or even before then, law enforcement responses, providing alternatives to transporting the individual to jail, and having other options in your community. Reducing the length of jail stay. We see that many of the results around routine screening and assessment and providing resources both within the jail and upon discharge, and knowing that those are available can reduce that length of stay. Any sorts of the efforts around pretrial services, pretrial risk assessments tools, and looking at your local bail policies also would apply to measure number 2. Measure number 3, which is increasing those connections to treatment. As you identify in your process evaluations and your capacity needs, where and what kinds of alternatives are lacking, what you need to scale up, making those referral processes easier, quicker, and then leveraging the different sorts of funding streams and resources that might be available to those that would qualify. And 4th, reducing the recidivism. We see that a lot of the responses to this 4th key measure is around supervision, community supervision strategies, making sure that you're applying the risk, needs, and responsivity principles, using evidence-based practices such as working with individuals through collaborative case planning that involves pairing up a mental health professional with your community supervision officer, offering curriculums and strategies that are cognitive-based and known to reduce the risk of reoffending. So those are just some ideas. It's not a comprehensive list, but just so that you can understand how possible strategies line up back with those 4 key measures. Okay, Nastasia, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Risa. Obviously, you know, like Risa said, lots of good resources on this, on the Stepping Up website, so you can get some additional details, and, you know, look forward to having our next two speakers who are part of that Innovator County cohort. So why don't we go ahead and get started with that? So our first presenter is Sheriff Kelly Rowe from Lubbock County, Texas. And Sheriff Rowe has been working in law enforcement and corrections for more than 25 years and been the sheriff for 10 years. He's also commissioner on the Texas Commission on Jail Standards, and he's a board member of the Sheriff's Association of Texas as well. And Lubbock County became the 10th Stepping Up Innovator County earlier this year. So we're excited to be able to highlight the work that they're doing. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sheriff Rowe.
All right, very good. I hope I don't blow it on my first attempt with this new technology here today. But again, welcome to everybody out there. Thank you again for the invitation and the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing. We're very proud of a lot of the efforts going on, and although I'm doing the talking, I hope everyone out there knows that there is a large number of staff that are very key in creating the successes we've seen so far with the initiative. And also, it was a pleasure to get to work on the initial assessment tool, self-assessment tool for the Stepping Up initiative, which I think, you know, helps everybody get this process up and going much quicker. But just real quick, and I think you can advance the slide. There we go. Just a couple of things about Lubbock, Texas. First and foremost, we are the home of the almost national champions. But that notwithstanding, we expect to see our overall population this next year break over as we get the new census results into about 315,000. Currently, we're at about 305. We operate a 1,512 bed direct supervision facility that we will have had open 9 years, a little later this summer. Our average daily population usually sits somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1,200. We're currently participating in jail-based competency restoration program, specialized housing for mental health, and we utilize, and this has been a real benefit to us, a number of grad students in their master level intern programs to fulfill their requirements they need to appropriately graduate. We can utilize them to deliver a large amount of mental health services in our facility, and currently we average about 96 inmates that meet our current definition of SMI. And a little other background is we talk about kind of where or why the Stepping Up initiative was important, is you know, when you look at the condition of our current capacity for mental health treatment across the state of Texas, as big as the state is, we've got a lot of limitations. In fact, just some numbers I received yesterday, jails, of which we have about 65,000 inmates sitting in Texas jails today. Just to give you an idea, we've got approximately 850 or so of those individuals that are waiting on state mental health beds through the state system, with a minimum or average wait time of about that many days. So a little over 820 days or so that these individuals are waiting to get into the state hospital system. So what we, you know, where we see the true importance here is what can we do to minimize these lengths of stay with these individuals as they're coming in. And frankly, and I don't think I'm unique to anybody else on the phone today, you know, we're seeing that almost 50% of our population is coming in being identified as having received some level of mental health client services prior to their arrival. Although it's a much smaller percentage, roughly 20 to 25% that need comprehensive services, it's still a very significant portion of our population. And in that, we book almost 20,000 a year. So again, and if you could advance to the next slide, please. Obviously, of the steps, one of the first one was mental health screening and assessments. And you'll see a link on there to the current form that our jail officers and booking staff utilize upon immediate intake into not only our facility, but all Texas facilities. This latest version we're on comes as a result of, and I think many of you may have heard of, the incident of a suicide that happened in one of our South Texas jails down near Houston, Harris County area. Female by the name of Sandra Bland. There's now been a special documentary done on that story on HBO, but that was during the interim of our legislative session, and so the staff here at the Jail Commission actually went to work, adapting and increasing this form substantially from where it was at to put a much greater highlight on high-risk mental health and suicide. And so again, Texas Jail started, and this became ultimately a required rule, promulgated as a rule for minimum jail standards, and this is the form we use. Now, in addition, in Lubbock, we're fortunate, and the rest of the state, sadly, we can't say this is more standardized across our state, but we have a good fortune of having our local mental health authority provide staff that are on duty within our facility. And when these individuals go through this initial core screening, the state system that is utilized when we're doing their base background, getting their driver's license information that will provide us at least a connection if the individual has received state services at some point. Won't give us any details, but it will at least tell us that they have received services. We can follow up, but then our mental health professionals will kick in and actually do the more detailed screening with regard to assessing what their current status is before making any classification, housing determinations, and obviously treatment decisions. If you could advance, please. Part two of this, of course, came in with regard to setting up the definition. And again, like I said earlier, although I'm doing the talking, there was certainly a lot smarter people that all came together in a collaborative effort that were willing to sit down. I think that's the key thing. One thing I know from doing the assessment portion in this, and you do see, and we just had our quarterly jail commission meeting here this morning earlier. And, one of the things we do see is the challenges we hear a lot of times is getting all the appropriate stakeholders around a table. And, that I don't have the time today, I don't think, to give any real pearls of wisdom on that, but it is going to be ultimately a key portion is that ability to get not only your local mental health, your jail, police departments, your hospital, districts involved, and a lot of times that may come down to getting everybody to see just what portions that each of them are spending with regard to taking care of mental health throughout the system, and realizing that the absolute most expensive delivery of mental health out there is that's delivered in our jail systems. So again, that I realize is the challenge, but these folks were good. They came around the table, sat down, and of course worked on the first aspect of this, which was to get the serious mental illness definition defined. And as we did here, we immediately fell back to our state statutes and our health and safety code for the core definition of this, but also realized that each individual stakeholder needed to maintain the ability to have some unique definitions with regard to that for purposes of making sure they didn't trigger certain things to happen that may not be appropriate, or to be missing some things in there that might be needing to get done if there was any deviation. But for the most part, we found that utilizing the actual statutory version fit with most everybody, with only some minimal adjustments office by office in that. If you could, one last slide there, I think. And then of course electronic tracking for all of this, that's the key, is that ability to literally track and see how these systems are working, that the assessments are going, that the treatments are being set up as they need to be, and then be able to deliver the best appropriate services. And as I talked about, That's the key we see in Texas is trying to get the best data we can across the entire state to best give our legislators, the tools they need to try to help address this as much as possible. But the flat reality is, like I said, for as large a state as we are, mental health is certainly, not one of the highest priorities. In fact, I think at last we looked in terms of per capita funding, we were at about 49 nationwide with that. So again, what you'll start to see, or what we're already seeing, is that a lot of the larger jurisdictions across the state, that have the capability of handling a lot of these things in-house are starting to migrate that way. And so you'll see the programs like jail-based competency restoration that, that with a few more things with it, we'll actually be able to take jurisdictions like ourselves off of that state need, free those up for the more rural and frontier areas to be able to utilize those services more as a priority and start speeding up and reducing, again, these individuals. Obviously, all our goal is to find alternatives other than having individuals with serious mental illness sitting in our jails. That's the goal of it all. But this last portion, like I said, becomes the key thing, because without the data and without stuff that you can rely on to figure out what's working, and a lot of times with state systems, and Texas isn't too different. A lot of times we look at output and we're missing completely outcomes. And area by area and facility by facility, we're seeing lots of great work happening. It's creating a lot of great outcomes for these individuals that, like I said, unfortunately, because of our changes from inpatient to outpatient care, our jails have become our de facto mental institutions. And it's efforts like this that are starting to, I think, open everybody's eyes to move us back away from that and get mental health handled where it needs to be, primarily outpatient when it can, and again, not seeing these folks sitting in our jails for long periods of time. So on that, I will look forward to any questions here at the end, but for that part, that concludes my portion.
Great. Thank you so much, Sheriff. We appreciate your comments and your passion on this really important issue. So thank you for sharing. One of the things that you had mentioned that I wanted to make sure to highlight for folks too, we usually have someone from the Department of Justice who's able to join us on these webinars and give a little bit of update from the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And unfortunately, the scheduling didn't work out, so we don't have someone from DOJ on the call today. But the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program grant that the sheriff was just talking about, that solicitation has been released. You should be getting an email about that from Stepping Up, I think maybe this week, if not on Monday, but you can go if you're eager to get started on that application and interested in getting involved in that. You can get that on the Department of Justice's website under, I think, the Office of Justice Programs has all of their grants on there. But we will be sending that out through the Stepping Up email list. If you're part of that list, make sure that you are. But that grant, if you look at the language of it, really has a lot of these Stepping Up principles written into that grant solicitation. So hopefully, if you've been participating in Stepping Up, it might position you better to be a stronger applicant on those applications. So recommended everybody go on there. Didn't want to forget about that as we move along. So I want to now turn it over to our second set of presenters who are from Berks County, Pennsylvania, our newest Stepping Up Innovator County that just became an Innovator County last month. So we have three speakers from Berks County today. First, we have Pamela Seaman, and Ms. Seaman is the Deputy Administrator for Adults at Berks County Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities. She's been in the program for about 30 years and has held positions, with the program, both in the private sector and in the public sector. She holds a bachelor's degree in social welfare and a master's degree in public administration. So we're excited to have her. Our second presenter from Berks County is Dr. Emily Swardelis, and she is the Regional Mental Health Manager at Prime Care Medical, Inc. In this position, she assists with the implementation of policies and procedures for mental health services at prime care locations across Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New York. She joined Prime Care upon the completion of her degree and was promoted to regional manager in 2016. She is licensed in Pennsylvania, Maryland, New York, and West Virginia. And then finally, we have Justin Lukes from Berks County, and Justin is the Chief Information Officer for Berks County. He and his team are responsible for the delivery of all technology services for the county, so we've already heard how important that is. Justin holds a Master of Science degree in Analytics as well as an MBA and is a Certified Information Systems Security Professional. So thank you to all three of you for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Berks County.
So hi, everyone. This is Pam speaking from Berks County, and we're going to give you our little talk on the progress that we've made in Berks. So if you could switch the slide. Just a little bit about Berks County. As you can see, our population is about 420,000 people. For those of you who don't know where Berks County, Pennsylvania is, we're about an hour northwest of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The average daily population in our local jail is 1,104 in 2018, and we just have a little bit of information about diversions. We've had 461 since 2018, and that's diversions in a whole number of ways. Diversions from incarceration, diversions for looking at trying to reduce recidivism for people coming back in the door. So that's in total some information about our diversions. If you could advance the slide, please. So I'm going to talk to you about how we arrived at a common definition for serious mental illness. As the two prior speakers already both addressed, with places looking to state examples of definitions, that's definitely how we wound up there. Very commonplace for us and an easy place to start because both the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections and OMSAS under our Pennsylvania Department of Human Services had definitions that kind of mirrored one another. So in general, we're looking at people that are 18 years or older with a diagnosis of schizophrenia, a major mood disorder such as bipolar disorder, psychotic disorder, NOS, borderline personality disorder. And then on the mental health side, but this would also speak to the population at the prison just by virtue of what's going on with them and how they wound up there. We're usually looking for people that have had some additional treatment history, some sort of functional impairment, and maybe a coexisting history or circumstance. If you could advance the slide, please. So again, the starting place for us obviously is the jail. That's where all the data collection and analysis begins. And the jail was already using the MHSR scale, which has a 4-point classification, A, B, C, D, that, and Emily, the doctor's going to talk about the next assessment piece as to how people arrive at that. But for our purposes, the classification D are really the individuals that fall into that category of serious mental illness. Next slide, please. And then, again, as the sheriff also pointed out in his presentation, we fall along the same lines. We recognize the use of this common definition of serious mental illness in terms of this project, but we all have definitions that we also use. For example, the diversion information that I gave you, those individuals may include individuals outside of that SMI definition. So we all still continue to function outside of this project with other definitions that we need to use for our own purposes. And then the final point is just, this is where we're starting. And as we dig deeper into the data and into our analysis, where we ultimately go and how we may need to wind up on a continued joint agreement of a definition may change over time. So we recognize that this is at least where we're starting. And that's my portion. So I'll let you advance the slide and turn it over to the next person.
Hi, hello everyone. I work for Prime Care Medical, which is a private contracted vendor at the Berks County Jail for their medical and mental health services. So our team is responsible for the assessment component for everybody coming into the jail. We try to make sure that every single person who enters the jail system is screened within 4 hours of admission, because we found that in order to verify the medications and determine quickly what clinical needs are going to be set up for the patient, needs to happen as promptly as possible. So that's how we determine that 4-hour window. Our electronic medical record will track anybody who's ever been in services at the Berks County Jail System with mental health. So when they come back in, they will automatically be referred back to mental health as part of our safeguard for catching folks who maybe were in services in the past, but due to paranoia or psychosis, they didn't want to identify as needing mental health services this time around. We also use several validated assessment tools, but the one that looks for seriously mentally ill folks and symptomology is the Correctional Mental Health Screen for Men and Women. It is a public domain validated tool, and it's actually one that Stepping Up has recommended in some of their literature as well. We've been using it in Berks County for over 6 years now, and it's been found to have a validity of over 75%. So it's a pretty statistically solid tool, and there are cutoffs that are determined by the measure, which would determine if somebody was going to be referred to mental health or not. For the men, the cutoff score is 6, so anybody who scores a 6 or higher has an automatic referral to mental health, and for women, the cutoff score is 5. Next slide, please. So once somebody is determined and that 4-hour admission process of requiring mental health services, our mental health team is required to see them within 24 to 72 hours of admission. We say within 24 to 72 because we don't have any mental health staff in the jail on Sundays, but most of our new referrals are seen within 24 hours of admission to the jail. That way they can be referred for psychiatric follow-up and for continued mental health follow-up to make sure that we're meeting their clinical needs while they're with us. We always make sure that we meet consistently with our seriously mentally ill population. Some of our folks are seen daily, whether it just be a seg round or for an in-office contact, especially on our specialty housing units. So that would be anybody who's on the mental health housing unit, our segregated unit, or our medical housing unit. And then our seriously mentally ill folks who are not on specialty housing units are seen by mental health staff in a minimum of 30 days. And if they need to move to a specialty housing unit due to decompensation or something along those lines, we would increase the number of follow-ups. We also put another safeguard into place for folks who maybe are not known to the jail system and who could potentially be seriously mentally ill. They've made it past the screener process and were not identified. If they stay incarcerated in the jail for 90 days, we will automatically see those folks as well to make sure we're not missing anything when it comes to their clinical needs. In case somebody is actively psychotic but not making a disturbance, or one of those folks that doesn't draw a lot of attention to themselves, we try and catch them within those first 3 months as well. Next slide, please. And one thing that I just wanted to highlight as part of our efforts within the jail, which I think is probably some of the most important, is the amount of meetings and discussions that we have around these folks. Our medical and mental health staff meet daily to have case conferences to discuss our folks who are on our specialty housing units, whether it be because of self-injurious behavior or active psychosis. We're in constant communication. We also, on a weekly basis, include security staff in those meetings. That way we can develop behavior plans and positive reinforcement schedules within the jail. We also meet monthly with administrative staff to review our behavior plans and any modifications that need to be made for the treatment planning. And then once a month, and this is probably our most important thing that we do, the warden, deputy warden of treatment, lieutenant from custody, our medical and mental health staff, our county mental health staff, adult probation, the DA, the PD, and all of our local service providers come to the table to try and get these folks out of our jail. We use these opportunities to set up housing, to come up with planning. If we need to have a competency evaluation done, we can bring it to the attention of the folks at the table. And it's really because of our warden and deputy warden of treatment driving this and being a collaborative approach. We wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that we were doing if we didn't have the support of our administration. So that's really something about making sure that everybody's on the same page as far as what we're going to do to get these folks out of jail and to hopefully keep them from coming back. That was all that I have, so I will turn it over to the next person.
Thank you. This is Justin Luce. I'm the CIO for the county. As you could hear, we really have great people doing a lot of great work in each of our individual departments, in the jail, and in our mental health group, in our adult probation group, and in all of our great partners like Prime Care. My challenge here was to try to bring that data together so we could capture baseline data that doesn't just look at each individual department, but looks kind of across the system and cuts across our continuity of care. And to do that, we recognized that we needed to bring in together a data warehouse because all of our data systems are siloed in each of the departments, and there's very little ability to share data across those systems. One, because of technology, and two, because of privacy concerns. So what we did is we partnered with a group called Open Lattice, who I know has been frequently talked about on many of data-driven justice calls, and I believe the Stepping Up calls as well. And that product uses artificial intelligence and deep learning to take extracts from each of the systems of record, kind of put it into a data warehouse, and join the person records across the different siloed data sets. And from that, we can get a sense of one person's interaction across many different data sets or county departments. So the benefit there is that we can join data sets that are owned by the county, as well as data sets that exist in some of our community partners. And we can do that in a way where we can share that data without violating privacy laws. And also we can easily manage that because we have, the county doesn't have to worry about onboarding all that data. We can leverage a partner to do that and can create data sharing agreements with that partner to limit privacy concerns. And the majority of our data then is de-identified. So we take the individual, any identifiers about that individual person, and we drop that out of the data set. And that de-identified data leaves us with some lack of specificity. So we're kind of taking a step back and taking a broader view at our data. But that really gives us the ability to do two things with the data. One is it gives us the ability to gain insight and look at the system as a whole and try to identify places where we can do better. And it gives us the ability to have oversight of the system so that we can plan our next steps for continuous improvement. So when it comes to gaining insight of the data, what we can do is we can look at the individual processes in the criminal justice system and mental health system. So we can track the use of intercepts and look at how frequently we're leveraging the intercepts for things like diversions. We can look for trends. We can compare demographics and look at how our population, how our county population is represented in the mental health and criminal justice systems. So we can compare this with like our census data and see if we're seeing the same distribution in our systems that we see in the county in general. We can also look at, because we're getting some of our partner data or not-for-profit data, we can also get a sense of how some of those programs are being used. It also helps us to identify data issues. So data entry issues exist in likely all of our county data sets. So as we bring that data together and join it, it can help us to identify where we have gaps in data entry. And the quality of that data is just so important. So every time we identify a gap, we can then work with the department to go back and provide whatever kind of training or have any discussions with the folks entering that data to make sure that it's clean going forward. And then also, in terms of gaining insight from the data, it gives us the ability to verify or validate institutional knowledge and beliefs. So, everyone in our system, mental health system or criminal justice system, has have opinions on how they they think the system is working overall, or how they, what they think about the population. And what we can do is use the data to validate or invalidate that. And so far, what we've seen with the data is that we've been able to really validate, some of the things that we're hearing coming out of the mental health group or the jail, where they have a, very in tune to stepping up and data-driven justice. And, they're saying, hey, this is what we're seeing in our population. And thankfully, as we've joined that data together, we've seen that their understanding is absolutely correct. So, that's, it helps to gain confidence in kind of expressing some of those opinions, maybe to elected officials or other, county leadership. So I think overall, in the long term, the ability to gain that kind of insight from the data is very, very valuable. In terms of using that data for oversight of the processes as a whole, in oversight, it allows us to look at segments of our population and look at some of the outcomes and places where maybe specific groups or specific populations might be underperforming in the system, or may not be getting equal outcomes as some other groups. So when it comes to, to stepping up, we're definitely focused on folks with serious mental illness. But really, our data system is not limited to that. So we could be looking at people, segmenting people by low risk offenders and looking at their outcomes and their experience in the criminal justice system. We could be looking at our homeless population and how they're being served by both the mental health system and the criminal justice system. The oversight of our data in our data warehouse allows us to assess the capacity of the system and see places where we might not have the right type of resources or programs in place. And then finally, it can help us to find gaps in the system and places where folks are getting disconnected from programs or treatment, or maybe where they could be connected to other services. So that's kind of a broad view around how we're looking to leverage at least the data that comes out of our data warehouse project. And the intention there, again, is to help to leverage that kind of de-identified data so that we can be very systematic in our approach. So we don't get wrapped into specifics of specific programs or specific activities. We can kind of take a step back and look at the system overall. And in terms of, for those counties that feel like they're going to be challenged with some of the information technology components of this, I just wanted to reassure everyone, for us, there's lots of vendors out there that do this. For us, our experience with Open Lattice has been like hitting the easy button. The onboarding of data was very, very easy, and very, very quickly we could view our baseline data. The caution is that, however, with the data warehouse, there needs to be a long-term commitment to care and feeding. So identifying data entry issues, data quality issues, we recognize that has got to be an ongoing consideration for every participant in our data warehouse and every part of the system. And then if you could go to the next slide, please. And then this is just contact information. I know that all of the participants here at Berks are willing to talk with anyone or help you in any way we can to share our limited knowledge. We're the newcomers here, so I know there's lots of different partners that have a lot of insight to share, but to the extent of how we can be helpful, we're willing to do so. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to all three of you from Berks County. Lots of information. Great to have your different perspectives on your different components of this and how you all work together on getting this and making sure that this is successful. So thank you all so much. All right, we're going to turn it over to questions from the audience. And so these are for all of the speakers. We've already been getting a ton of questions in. So I'm going to start off with some of the ones that have come in. But if folks have other questions, please feel free to type those into the questions box. So one of the first questions we got, and I'm going to sort of combine two questions, was if you already know that if the person has already received a clinical assessment on record, or you know that they have a diagnosis of SMI based on health records, or because they've already gotten this assessment, you know, what is the different process there? And is there a different process if a mental health court is involved? So I don't know if one of the counties wants to address that first.
Well, I would just add that if I'm understanding those questions correctly, a lot of that in terms is statutorily driven, especially when you talk about when the assessments need to occur, what information you have access to from where a previous assessment might have been conducted by a mental health specialist, and then anything having to do with direction or filing through to a mental health court, or in some cases where the magistrate has to make some decisions upon that first initial appearance. A lot of that, like I said, is typically statute driven more so than at least in my experience, policy driven.
Anybody in Berks County want to comment on that, or Risa?
This Risa, I mean, I'll just chime in and say that, you know, I would probably, you know, circle back to your process analysis piece. And, you know, again, as the sheriff said, particularly around information sharing, many times we see state statutes are more prescriptive than HIPAA. So it's important to, you know, look at that. But, you know, for example, if it's involving that you have a mental health court or some sort of specialty court, you know, it's important to have those a representative of that process around your table in terms of determining, you know, those releases of information and you know, how you could share that and hopefully expedite things and you know, keep from duplicating, you know, another screening evaluation process, whatever. So I don't know if that's helpful. It's difficult to give an across-the-board answer, you know, when it's going to vary so much county by county.
All right. Thank you both. There was a question that came in for the sheriff. Where does Lubbock County funding come from to provide those services in the jail?
Well, primarily the county is in contract with our local mental health authority that brings a lot of the staff in. But where we've taken, you know, been able to take some tremendous advantages is like one of the things I talked about, which is the utilizing the interns that need, you know, I think as of now currently 5,000 hours of time, so that we've got I just went blank all of a sudden, but we've got the LPCS is actually one of our paid staff members that supervises and signs off on those hours. But again, we've got like I think currently 30 you know, of those folks coming in at no cost. So to try to take advantage of some of those, if you have universities in your county or in your area, those folks need a lot of those hours completed. So that's one good source. And we do sometimes use the inmate trust fund in some areas where that's applicable, where we have discretion over those funds to utilize for staff as well.
Great, thank you. And Berks County, would you like to answer that one too, about how you guys are paying for those services?
Our funding comes primarily from state, totally from state, federal tax and county tax dollars. In Pennsylvania, we have something called the Human Services Block Grant that covers all of our non-Medicaid funded lives. As far as the funding of it in the prison, the services in the prison are funded directly through county tax dollars and a contract between the county and prime care.
Great, thank you. So for Berks County, we got a couple of questions. So one of the questions was, again, sort of around some of these confidentiality issues. So during the multidisciplinary meetings, how do you work around confidentiality?
Well, most of the time, it's things that are already known by the parties involved. So if you have somebody who is seriously mentally ill that's been banging their head and been placed in the restraint chair, the folks coming into that meeting already know about it because security has facilitated that admission into the chair, things like that. We also have a business associates agreement in place, which does help with some of that confidentiality piece, but we don't go into depth about a lot of things, such as, like, we don't talk about medication compliance. We're not talking about their therapy notes. We're talking about more broad, overwhelmed things from folks that have already been identified as by most of the parties involved in the room.
Okay, great, thank you. Can we, and folks have already been sending messages asking if they can see your business associates agreement, so we can connect you guys over email, and you can discuss if that's something that you're willing to share. For both counties, do you all also have a common definition for substance use disorders? We'll just start with the sheriff.
Yes, ma'am, we do. Trying to get back to my notes on it right this second, but no, they, again, you know, and of course I went very generically through the SMI portion of that, but that gets broken down considerably in much more detail, and then when you branch off into that particular topic with all the co-occurring conditions we have along those lines, we definitely want those to be as clear as possible.
In Berks County, do you guys have a substance use disorder definition?
We don't. That's really the next step in our process here to really start to delve into that. We have some meetings scheduled actually within a few minutes of this meeting with our single county authority on substance abuse, and we're really kind of kicking the discussions with them into high gear to bring that into focus for both for our stepping up data warehouse as well as integrating them into some of our business processes.
Great. All right. Last question that I'd like for everyone to jump in on is, you know, what is the role of probation in your efforts locally on this? So maybe we'll start with Berks County.
Probation, as Emily mentioned, they're right there at the table with us as we're planning and discussing what's going on with people, working on the discharge plan for people prior to the release, whether that be a treatment program in the community or, you know, housing with other kinds of support. And they certainly have been players in this whole data sharing initiative as well.
Yeah, if I can just add to that from a data perspective, we've found that probation parole, you know, they're really one of the main data sources. I mean, their data system has all of the different risk assessments. You know, in Berks County, we use the ORAS risk assessments, which has different levels of risk assessment happening at different parts of the journey, and those are all housed inside the adult probation data set. And they really, I mean, I know they've had a great working relationship, and they're very integrated with the great folks at the jail in helping to, you know, make sure that data is captured and entered accurately.
Thank you. Sheriff, you all work with probation on these efforts?
Yes, we certainly do. It's we don't have as much interaction with parole, Texas. You know, those folks get sent separately, and those continuity care issues and tracking happen once they hit the prison systems. And we're not a unified system between jails and prisons. But in terms of probation, yes, very hand in hand with those folks. We share a lot of the same information, assessment tools, and, primarily to prepare for pretrial decisions and terminations, to help assist with, again, getting these individuals through the system at a much more expedient rate.
Great. All right. In the interest of time, because we have 1 minute left in the webinar, I'm going to go ahead and close out the questions. Thank you to everybody who submitted questions. Please feel free to reach out to the speakers or reach out to me, and I can connect you with the speakers to get some of these additional questions answered, because we had lots of questions come in, and I'm sorry that we didn't have enough time to get through everybody. So here's our contact information. Please don't hesitate to contact any of us from the Stepping Up Initiative if you have any questions. Thank you again to our speakers. I want to do some quick polling while I'm talking. So can we launch the first poll just so we can get an idea of where people are coming from who are participating in the webinar? So just go ahead and fill these out. I'm not going to go through the results. I'm just going to keep talking over them. Maybe give them 15 seconds each, and then we'll close them out. So we hope that you all, after listening a little bit more about the webinar, about the month of action, will consider participating in the Stepping Up Month of Action. Don't forget to let us know if you decide that you are going to engage. Just send us an email to the info@stepuptogether.org that you see there. You can find out more information on everything that Lindsey talked about on the website, on the homepage, stepuptogether.org. Our next Stepping Up webinar will take place in in August, so we'll get you some details about that closer to the date. And please remember that we are going to be launching an evaluation after this call, so please fill that out. We actually do look at them. We want to know what you guys are working on and what would be helpful to you on future webinars, so please go ahead and fill that out. So thank you, everybody, for your participation in the webinar today. Thank you to our speakers, and we hope to have you on future Stepping Up webinars. Have a great day, everybody.